Oh my god, Phyllis
Makes me
Schlafly.
nuts, clearly.
Literally, okay, so the worst prank anyone ever pulled on me actually had to do with Phyllis Schlafly. Somebody signed me up for her friggin' Eagle Forums emails at some point, and I couldn't get off the list. Like, I kept unsubscribing, and they kept just coming back into my inbox. I don't know if somebody, like, was resubscribing me, or if they just have, like, terrible email maintenance, which wouldn't surprise me. But it was awful. I could not get this woman and her shitty takes out of my inbox.
I'm sorry. They gave you email herpes.
Yeah, they truly did.
3 women talking about politics?
If democracy had a group chat, this would be it. Welcome to Organizing Chaos with Roots to Results, where we unpack the chaos that is politics in 2026 and give you the tools you need to do something about it, all in 20 minutes or less. Why 20 minutes? Because nobody has time for anything else. I'm Meg Simons, Creative Director at Roots to Results, and I'm here with my amazing co-hosts, founders, and all-around political badasses, Laura Miranda Brown.
Hey.
And Sarah Virgo.
Hi.
Oh, look, 3 women talking about women's history during Women's History Month.
Laurels for spring. Groundbreaking.
It's actually really fucking awesome and pretty revolutionary. And this isn't just going to be your average rundown of women that you hear about every Women's History Month. Oh no, we've turned this into a game. Similar to Two Truths and a Lie, today we're going to give you 2 heroes and a villain. We're each going to talk about 2 women that we think history has overlooked, and 1 that we wish history would forget about completely. If you listen to our GTFO episode, this is going to work kind of similarly. Each of us is going to get 1 minute to talk about our person, and we'll go in kind of a round-robin format. With the logistics out of the way, Sarah, who's your first hero?
Thanks, Meg. I have selected Shirley Chisholm. She believed that government should actually reflect the people that it governs. What a novel idea. When she became the first Black woman elected to Congress in 1968, she didn't see herself as representing only one community. She believed deeply that lived experience mattered in policymaking and that people who understood poverty and discrimination and childcare struggles and underfunded schools firsthand should be the ones writing the laws. She pushed for universal childcare, expanded education funding, anti-poverty programs, and workforce equity because she believed America worked best when it worked for everyone. In 1972, when she ran for president, she wasn't the first candidate for Black America or for Women's America. She was the candidate for the American people. Chisholm wanted a country where policy wasn't abstract. It was grounded in real life, in real families, in real struggle. And she demanded that Congress legislate accordingly. She is forever one of my favorites.
Oh man, you started us out at the gate with a really good one, Sarah. Thank you.
I personally love Chisholm's quote, "If they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair." That is exactly the energy we need in American politics today. Speaking of energy we need in politics today, Laura, I hear your first hero is kind of an expert in channeling feminine rage. So clearly I need to hear more immediately.
Okay, we're going to go back to my art history roots, and I'm going to highlight Artemisia Gentileschi, an Italian Baroque painter who had a thriving career and who was patronized by a number of European rulers, so much so that she had her own workshop where she employed other artists to like prep her canvases and do the grunt work of like mixing paints. It's like so badass. Anyway, she was the first woman to be inducted into Florence's Academy of the Arts and Drawings and painted a series of frescoes for the Medici court. She was basically lost in history until the middle of the 20th century. She's an extraordinary figure. And on top of that, in 1611, she was raped. And the man who abused her was put on trial and found guilty. From then on, she painted biblical and historical paintings that focused on women in control. She painted Judith beheading Holofernes, a word I can never say, so somebody come and correct me, no less than 5 times. And unlike her male peers, she actually showed the moment of the beheading. Judith is grasping this guy's head, holding his hair back, while she's actively slicing into his neck, and her handmaid/best friend is holding down his arms. These women are enacting their revenge for Judith's own sexual assault. Artemisia took no shit and spent her life making art that centered women, and not just women in domestic labor or moments of piety, but women taking control of their own lives. Meg, it's your turn. Hit us with your first hero. I'm gonna guess it's quartz related, but let me know if I'm wrong.
I mean, yeah, you guessed it. Mine is quartz related. I'm going to talk about Constance Baker Motley.
Oh, that's a good one.
Man, I wish that I had some sort of like clue into the lottery in the same way that I have a clue into Meg always choosing the quartz, right? Like I'd be a bajillionaire at this point.
If the lottery were as predictable as me talking about the quartz, we would all be like Jeff Bezos rich.
No, nobody wants to be him. Like nobody wants to be him.
Okay, yeah, you're right. You're right.
Gross.
None of us want to be Jeff Bezos. Maybe we could be, what's his ex-wife's name? The one who's like always giving away money to charity.
Mackenzie Scott?
Yeah, we could be Mackenzie Scott rich.
Okay.
But until then, I want to talk to you about Constance Baker Motley. People who are aware of Constance Baker Motley probably know her as the first black woman to become a federal judge, which is already totally badass. But I have to tell you, she has done so much more than that. She was a key legal strategist of the civil rights movement, representing people you might have heard of, like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the Freedom Riders, and even the Birmingham Children Marchers. She even wrote the original complaint in Brown v. Board of Education, one of the most iconic Supreme Court cases. She was also the first black woman to argue a case before the Supreme Court. And she didn't just do it once. She argued 10 civil rights cases before the Supreme Court, and she won 9 of them. And it was only after all of that that LBJ decided to put her on the federal bench. And you're probably like, okay, now she becomes a federal judge. Things cool down. She becomes less iconic. Wrong. Even with her decisions as a judge, she continued to make change and inspire other leaders in the civil rights movement. Judy Heumann, who is known as the mother of the disability rights movement, credits Constance Baker Motley as the reason she was able to become the first teacher who used a wheelchair in New York. Constance Baker Motley really embodies the idea of the first but not the last. And frankly, I'm still waiting for my Hamilton-style musical about her. Like, Lin-Manuel Miranda, when? So, let's move on to our second round of heroes. Laura, you want to kick us off?
My second hero is someone I learned about only 2 years ago. Shame on me. Elizabeth Bessie Coleman. If you, like me, don't know her story, I can't encourage you enough to go out and learn more. 1 minute is not going to be enough. But here goes. She was born to sharecroppers in Texas. Bessie eventually ended up in Chicago, where she learned of flying, like airplanes, from men who had served in World War I. She took an immediate interest, and I mean, how badass, right? Like, she's a woman in the early 1900s, a black Native American woman in the early 1900s who's so determined to become a pilot that she becomes the first American. Not just woman, not black woman, not Native American, first American to get an international pilot's license from the International Aeronautic Federation, but actually said in French, which I can't do. Bessie knew that the U.S. was not a place where she was going to be able to advance her career. So after working in Chicago, she received financial sponsorship to start flight school in Paris. After learning to fly and training across Europe, she launched her U.S. career as an exhibition pilot. She did that for 5 years, gaining greater and greater fame. She used her fame and platform to promote aviation and combat racism by refusing to participate in any event that prohibited African Americans from attending. Her goal was to eventually open a flight school in the U.S. so that other African American people could learn to fly, both men and women. But on April 30th, 1926, Bessie went to Dallas with her mechanic, William Willis, to pick up a new plane. It was in terrible shape, and her friends and family begged her not to fly in it. but she wouldn't bail on her commitment to participate in an air show the next day. Willis was piloting the plane while Bessie was in the co-pilot seat, unclipped and prepared to practice a parachute jump. About 10 minutes into the flight, Willis lost control of the plane. It went into a dive. Bessie was thrown from the plane, and she died. Willis also died in the ensuing wreck. 10,000 people attended her funeral in Chicago. Can you imagine what the world could have looked like if this absolute firebrand of a human lived for longer than 34 years?
This is no shade to Amelia Earhart, but how do we know so much about Amelia Earhart and yet we never talk about Bessie Coleman?
She was actually invited to be in a film. Like, they were going to film her as the star of this early production, which, you know, there weren't that many black women in film to begin with, let alone a black woman flying a plane. But when she got on set and realized that they were going to make her start out the movie in like bedraggled, shitty clothing, carrying all of her worldly possessions on her back as she's like trudging through a field, she was like, nobody is going to make that my opening in a film. And she walked away. And she said, I will do everything to make my dreams of getting a flight academy built in the United States happen, but I will not set back the cause of African Americans in this country by letting myself be depicted that way. I mean, it's just so badass.
Okay, while I think up how to get a Bessie Coleman movie in the works, Sarah, do you want to tell us about your second hero?
So I've selected for my second hero, Fannie Lou Hamer, one of my all-time favorites again. She endured brutality that most people would not survive, and she still believed deeply enough in democracy to risk her entire life for it. After attempting to register to vote in Mississippi in 1962, what a time to be in Mississippi, she was fired, threatened, beaten, and jailed. And then in custody, she was brutally assaulted. She was also a survivor of forced sterilization, which was a common practice with African American women in that time. Horrific. The system really, really tried to break her, but it didn't. Instead, she did something that we have always promoted here, which is she organized. She co-founded the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party and helped to challenge the legitimacy of an all-white delegation at the 1964 DNC. That televised testimony about the violence that black voters were facing forced the nation to confront what was happening in the South. And it would not have happened if it had not been for that testimony being broadcast on national television. She wasn't seeking comfort, though. She was willing to die for the right to vote because she believed the promise of America had to include everyone, similar to Shirley Chisholm. Her courage didn't just inspire people, it helped to really accelerate the movement that led to the Voting Rights Act. She is the epitome of a hero.
And so now from that, we're going to transition to Meg, who is your second hero here.
I'm going to fully acknowledge that what I'm about to do is technically cheating. And that's that I'm going to talk about two women at once. So I'm going to talk about Marsha B. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera. Everybody has a different story about how the Stonewall riots really started, whether it was a drag king who threw a brick, or Marsha who threw a shot glass. Maybe they weren't even there. But regardless, Marsha and Sylvia are both inextricably linked to the Stonewall riots. And while history often describes them as drag queens, they were also trans women. And they fought for the rights of trans people, even when the rest of the gay rights movement wasn't yet on board. Together, they founded what is widely known as the first political organization for trans people in the United States, which was known as STAR. They advocated for the things we're still fighting for today, like bodily autonomy, in addition to free clothing, education, food, healthcare, housing, and transportation, things we all need. They provided food and shelter for transgender youth. And I think nowadays when we think of lobbying in the queer community, we're thinking about huge organizations like the HRC with money and funders and support. So far from the reality that Marsha and Sylvia were living. They were homeless. They were engaging in sex work to pay not just for their bills, as we see ICE in our airports, as we see states still continuing to pass don't say gay bills, as we see the federal government trying to, like, roll back protections and access to healthcare for trans people, as we see ICE in our airports, as we see Republicans cutting the subsidies that make healthcare affordable, I think it's super important to remember people like Marcia and Sylvia who were fighting both for their community, who, yes, were fighting for their communities and fighting for trans people, but they were fighting for all of us. And it's going to take all of us coming together and fighting for our communities to make sure that we all have access to these things and, like, defeat these, like, fascist nut jobs in the White House. Okay, it's the round you've all been waiting for. The villains. So my villain is J.K. Rowling. Knowing your Hogwarts house was like a core piece of your identity as an early millennial. But here's the thing. J.K. Rowling is a fucking TERF. She's a trash human being who has all the money in the world and could just quietly do that. She could just have money, and she could have shitty opinions and keep them to herself. And instead, she has started an entire fund that she is self-funding to attack trans women. Why? Why? Why do this? Why be a monster on purpose? The books are shrouded in nostalgia for a lot of us, but it's time to, like, get over it. It's time to move on, because her shitty takes don't end with trans people, but her hatred of trans people should be enough. And you know what? I'm just going to blanket statement this. If in this year, 2026, you're still using your Hogwarts house as, like, part of your personality, you're on my fucking list. It's time to forget her name and stop having patience for people who continue to cling on to her books. Sarah, I truly can't wait to hear who yours is. Your time starts now.
Okay. So Allie Beth Stuckey isn't just a podcaster with opinions. She's part of a growing ecosystem where white Christian nationalist rhetoric attempts to blend faith with political power, my least favorite combination. On her platform, she argues against abortion access in almost all circumstances, opposes LGBTQ plus equality, and frames feminism and autonomy as a moral decline. Her message is that women's freedom is dangerous and traditional hierarchy is safe. She fuels the fear that MAGA loves to lean into, the irrational fear about birth rates and gender roles and bathrooms, but it's really just fear about losing cultural dominance. When this happens, women and the queer community are in real danger, and this all becomes justification for state control. When the same rhetoric that has benefited her is recast as rebellion and equality as threat, women's rights aren't just debated, they're eliminated, and they're all at an all-time fucking low right now to begin with. The harm is not radical here if it eventually becomes legislative, which we are seeing now. Insert Project 2025 and all the other nonsense that's been promoted. Allie is nothing more than a self-hating MAGA trad wife with a microphone, a perfect modern-day villain.
Yeah, fuck her. And I didn't even know her name before.
Good.
So I'm
glad.
delighted that I'm nowhere near this pile of trash, and that I can purposely now continue to not know it.
Yeah, this woman sounds absolutely terrible. All right, let's get through this last one so then we can go back to pretending like these women never existed. So, all right, Laura, give us your villain.
Phyllis Schlafly
Ugh.
was the original Erica Kirk. A woman who personifies the Cuban phrase bicho malo nunca muere, which means bad bugs never die. For those of you who have never heard of her, congratulations. I hope no one ever hears of her again. But here's the TLDR. She was a quote-unquote activist who opposed feminism, gay rights, abortion, and most famously, the Equal Rights Amendment. Insert biggest eye roll here. That's right, a woman who went to Washington University in St. Louis, then went to Harvard for a master's in government, Radcliffe at the time, and who later became a fucking lawyer, spent her adult life advocating against women having equal rights under the Constitution. Phyllis fucking ran for Congress in 1952. She also led a, quote, revolt of moral conservatives who basically fought Richard Nixon because they thought he was too liberal with his stance against segregation. She was a member of the John Birch Society, which she then later tried to claim she wasn't, but her real special sauce was her determination to stop the ERA. S-T-O-P meant stop taking our privileges. I'm not kidding. She argued the ERA would take away gender-specific privileges women had. It took me a while to think of what any of those might be, but when I did the research, it seemed like she liked that women were excluded from the draft, and she liked the requirements for separate bathrooms. Not kidding. I told you, she was Erica Kirk version 1.0. Many historians, including political scientist Jane Mansbridge, have clearly stated that the ERA would have been ratified in either 1976 or 1975, but because Phyllis fucking Schlafly's early efforts to organize, which kills me, the ratification failed. May her memory die out, and may we never see her ilk again. Fuck her.
Yeah, she's really awful. Oh, there we go.
She's like the baseline for all of these bitches. Oh, you can't have a life. You can't do this because of patriarchy and living a traditional life like your Stucky lady, right? While she's out there on the fucking political trail, speaking, going all over the country, leaving her children at home to be raised by other people. Fuck you.
All right, folks, on that note, we're coming up on our 20-minute limits, but I want to hear your heroes and villains. So give us your hot takes on social media. You can find us on all the channels at Organizing Chaos Pod. That's it for this episode of Organizing Chaos. Go outside, touch grass. Feel free to delete all the villains you learned today from your memory. And remember, the group chat is only part of the movement. We'll see you next time. Bye!